this point, it's no secret that Ready or Not is a pretty intense game. In fact, me sitting here and saying that it's just pretty intense is sort of the understatement of the century. There have been several points throughout my playthrough where I've literally had to stop playing the game because its subject matter made me that uncomfortable. Now, I think a big part of that was that never before had I seen a game that talked about school shootings or human trafficking. And Ready or Not only covers these topics, but they do so in a way that genuinely hurts you. Now, with this, naturally, there comes a lot of unsettling and heartbreaking moments, but none of them can hold a candle to the level that we're discussing today. This mission is the culmination of the game's exploited storyline, and it is, in my opinion, one of the darkest levels in gaming history. I'm talking, of course, about Valley of the Dolls. But before we get into all of that pandemonium, I think that this is the perfect opportunity to introduce you to today's video partner, NordVPN. Do you like security? I sure hope you do. Every day that you log online, you're going through a gauntlet of phishing schemes, stolen information, and people trying to take advantage of you on the internet. You might even think you're safe. Little do you know, some shell company in Siberia just set up a dummy store operation and stole your mom's credit card number. Checkmate, gamers. However, with NordVPN, you have a proverbial big brother watching your back. Not only does NordVPN allow you to surf the web with anonymity, but it also monitors any potential threats that might harm you or your computer. You don't even need to connect to a VPN server. Nord's built-in Threat Protection Pro will automatically scan the sites that you visit and block dangerous ones before they can harm you. So if you're interested in keeping you and your data protected, please consider checking out NordVPN today. If you go to nordvpn.com/Isaac, you'll receive the very best offer that they have. And if you find out that you don't like it, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you guys are interested, be sure to go to nordvpn.com/Isaac to get yourself protected today. And I just want to give a big thank you to NordVPN for partnering with today's video. Let's get back to it. Now, if you haven't been keeping up with this lore series, or you're not too familiar with Ready or Not, here's a quick recap of what's happened so far. In some of our earlier missions, we've been investigating an underground cheese pizza ring. It all started when we responded to a call at a popular streamer's house, and while searching the scene, we just so happened to find some illicit material sitting next to his bed. When we checked his PC, we discovered that he'd been downloading this content from a server hosted by a nearby tech company. So naturally, we go and investigate this tech company, and after seizing and analyzing their hard drives, we're led to a child talent agency called Brixley Talent Time. Now, as I mentioned in the last episode, Brixley Talent Time is sketchy as hell. Even from the outside, you can immediately tell that something's not right here. Essentially, this agency lures in desperate parents with promises of turning their kids into the next big Hollywood stars. All the parents have to do is drop their children off, and the agency will supposedly handle the rest. But what's happening behind closed doors is much darker than that. The kids brought here are being exploited and harassed by the owner, George Brixley. Some of these kids are even being drugged to make them easier to control. Brixley's also been taking photos of these children and sending them to a mysterious figure known only as AV. And when this AV sees a child that he likes, he shows up in person and takes them. Now, given this situation, I theorize that some of these parents don't even realize what's going on here. Brixley likely tells them that their kid is going out on an audition or something, and as long as that money keeps rolling in, these parents don't ask questions. And let's be real here, right? The people taking their kids here aren't caring, protective parents. These are people using their children as a quick way to make money, even if it means throwing them straight into danger. Thankfully though, we're able to track down and arrest George Brixley, but AV, the one who's truly pulling the strings here, is still out there. At least that is until the LSPD Cybercrime Division makes a breakthrough in the case. They're able to trace a series of wire transfers from an offshore bank account linked to a shell company in Romania. And interestingly, that company recently made a payment to someone named Amos Vole. And if you take a look at this man's initials, you'll have found out that he is our mysterious AV. As it turns out though, Vole is a well-known adult film producer, and he's operating right here in Los Sueños. Our briefing notes that he's been in this industry for decades, and judging just by his mansion, it seems like he's made a fortune doing it. But make no mistake, behind this wealth and reputation, Vole is a predator. He is the AV that has been orchestrating all of this madness. He's been exploiting the vulnerable in the most horrific way imaginable, and now it's our job to bring him down. With all of this information in mind though, we can begin to gear up and make our way towards Vole's mansion. However, as soon as we arrive, it immediately becomes clear that this mission won't be as straightforward as we had hoped. You see, at the time of our raid, Vole just so happens to conveniently be hosting his daughter's 18th birthday party. And because of this, the mansion is packed with guests, many of them being young, uninvolved bystanders. Even though we're targeting some of the worst criminals imaginable, we still need to exercise caution and professionalism here, because no innocent kids deserve to die in the crossfire. Now, as we begin to enter the property, it quickly becomes apparent just how wealthy Vole really is. We can see that he's gifted his daughter a brand new G-Wagon, and a sign by the gate also reveals that he's hired a private armed security detail to protect his estate 24/7. Now, according to our briefing, this company, Bolton Security, is composed of former police officers and military veterans. And as we'll soon discover, these men are far better equipped and trained than the criminals that we typically encounter in this game. Now, some of you guys might recognize these guards from the Spider mission, and even though they're dressed quite differently there, the earpieces that these men wear are a dead giveaway. Now, this small connection is important because it highlights the depth of corruption shown by this security company. These guards aren't just here to protect Vole's assets, they know exactly what's going on. CCTV footage from our last briefing confirms that some of them have even participated in trafficking children back to Vole's mansion. So make no mistake, these men are totally complicit in what's happening here. Now, as we continue to work our way towards the house, the map gives us a choice. We can either breach the main entrance and work our way down, or we can take the nearby staircase and start from the ground floor instead. Now, personally, I prefer starting at the top since this map is filled with hidden corners and areas worth investigating. But before we move in, there is a disturbing little detail near the staircase that needs mentioning. Here we can find a Polaroid camera and some blank photo film, and a note pinned to the wall that reads, "Selfie contest. Take a picture of your bare feet and put it in the box next to the pool for a chance to win an awesome prize. Contest will be judged by the one and only Mr. Amos Vole." So in addition to, running a massive underground cheese pizza ring, Mr. Vole is also trying to manipulate his teenage visitors into taking feet pics for him. Anyways though, after all of that strangeness, we can proceed back upstairs and make our way through the front door. And as expected, Bolton Security isn't keen on letting us through without a fight. The second that we breach, these men open fire without hesitation. And to me, this reaction sort of says everything. You would think that a typical security force, especially one comprised of former law enforcement officers, would likely surrender upon seeing a SWAT team. But these guards know that they're in some seriously deep shit, and if Vole gets arrested, they're likely going down with him. So, instead of complying, they make the desperate and poor decision to fight back. This is not ideal for them. Once we deal with this initial resistance though, we begin to notice some details around the mansion that paint a clearer picture of Vole's crimes. The first of which is a very suspicious video on the TV in the living room. Now, I don't quite want to just jump the gun yet and say that this video is an adult movie, but we are in the house of a man who produces those for a living. And as we'll come to find out later, there is all sorts of this stuff just littering his house. So operating off of this notion, Amos Vole is showing an adult video of his wife to his guests, which is incredibly strange, but not particularly incriminating. However, if you look at the date shown in the video's title and you cross-reference that with his wife's birth date shown in our briefing, you'll find out that she was actually underage at the time of this filming. So to put it bluntly, Amos Vole is showing his guests CP. A bit further down the hall, we can find another chilling sight in a nearby bathroom. Several hard drives sit submerged in a bathtub, likely an attempt to destroy evidence. It seems that word of our arrival must have reached Vole just in time for him to try and cover some of his tracks. Working our way past this though, we'll find ourselves in Vole's bedroom, and here we can see that the walls are decorated with posters advertising his so-called films, featuring titles like Backdoor Babes 2 and Pole Patrol. We can also find some cameras set up by the bed, industrial photography lights, and various other pieces of film equipment scattered around. It would seem that this is the bedroom where he does most of his filming. Interestingly, we can also see some homemade adult DVDs lying in cases on the floor nearby. But after we take a closer look at them, this small detail becomes much more sinister. Many of the cases have the performer's age written on them, and the majority of these seem to be of people under 18. One case even has question marks on it instead of a number, suggesting that even Vole himself wasn't sure how young one of his victims was. There's also a case labeled Spider's Girls, which is a small detail, but one that hints at a much larger, darker operation. Continuing onward though, we can eventually find Danielle, Amos's wife, down the hall. However, at least during my playthroughs, she never really had anything much to say during this. So for now, we can continue to move on. If we continue our path along the hallway, we'll also find a guest room, an at-home gym, and some very questionable art and sculptures. But the only real thing of note here is a small package and note from Daniela, which reads, quote, "To my Bolton Bucks. Take to post and send today." And if we look at this package, we can see that it's being sent to Romania. Now, it's hard to say whether this package is involved in all of these crimes or not, because Danielle herself is from Romania, so she very well could be sending something back to her family. But as we've learned through our briefing, that shell corporation that the Voles are running is also based in Romania, so this could be tied to that. But regardless, this small detail does give us a bit to think about here. Moving past this though, we can begin to make our way downstairs, and here is probably the first spot in this level where we'll really need to be careful. The staircase itself is flanked by this massive window, completely exposing us to everyone outside. So if an enemy sees you before you see them here, you're sort of screwed. If we're able to get past this hurdle though, we'll make our way into another open room, and here we can find a couple of extra things worth mentioning. The first thing is the couch, where we can find some underwear and condoms sitting right out in the open. Not too far from this, we can find a sculpture, which seems to show a figure curled in a fetal position. And if we look at this just a bit closer, we'll find that this piece of art is titled, quote, "I just want to fuck whether you like it or not." And the artist of this piece is none other than Daniela Vole. Now, to me, this small detail is really interesting because this piece and title seem to suggest that this is depicting a rape victim. The sculpture seems to be deeply personal, possibly a reflection of Danielle's own trauma. And if we piece everything together that we've learned thus far, this would suggest that she wasn't just a victim of abuse when she was younger, but that she still continues to suffer even into her adulthood. And this art might be the only way she's able to express her pain. Now, it is worth mentioning that only a few of these sculptures have title plates, and out of those, this is the only one by Daniela Vole. So I feel like this was a really intentional move on the part of the developers. Moving away from this though, we'll eventually come across a small sort of bridge that takes us into a different section of the house. And this right here is yet another dangerous portion of the map, because again, we're visible to just about everyone in the room here, and we don't really have any cover to protect us. So we really need to be careful navigating this section. Across from this bridge though, we're able to find Janie's room, Vole's daughter, and on her door is a note telling her dad to keep the guards away from her room, saying, quote, "You're not the only one who knows how to use a camera." This line seems to suggest that Janie has at least a faint idea that her dad is involved in some pretty bad stuff. However, the extent of all of it is likely lost on her. She probably knows that he's an adult film producer and that he frequently uses drugs, but I would imagine that she isn't aware of all of the other stuff that he's wrapped up in. Making our way inside of her room, you'll find the surroundings of a typical high school girl. Band posters, books, and photos can be found all over the room. Funnily enough, on some of these photos, you can see where she's actually gone in and crossed out the face of her dad with like a Sharpie. And honestly, at this point, you can't really blame her. Also in this room, we can find a note from Janie's mom, which wishes her a happy birthday. We can also find a laptop where we can see that Janie is already trying to sell that car that her dad bought her. From everything that we've seen so far, it would seem that these two really don't get along. And all signs in this room seem to indicate that Janie is looking for the quickest opportunity to get the hell away from this place. And honestly, good for her. Anyways though, if we move our way back down this hallway, we can find a bar, a common area, as well as Amos Vol's office. We can find a note outside of his door warning visitors to stay away, stating that if he catches someone in there, he'll have to teach them a lesson. And when we make our way inside, we can see why. On his desk, we'll find even more details that seem to indicate that Vol is destroying evidence. We can find multiple hard drives sitting around, as well as a laptop and a PC, both displaying error screens. And next to all of this, we can see an industrial fishing magnet. And you know, if that wasn't enough for you, we can literally find a jerry can and a box of smoldering evidence sitting on the balcony outside. So if you weren't convinced before, it should be plain to see now that Amos Vol is actively trying to destroy evidence of his crimes, which makes it all the more important that we track him down and apprehend him quickly. Working our way down the balcony stairs, we'll find ourselves outside next to Vol's garden, but there really isn't a whole lot worth mentioning here. So for now, we'll work our way back inside and look around a bit more. Back inside on the bottom floor of the mansion, we can find more of the same. Bottles of opened alcohol, guards patrolling the halls, and guests fleeing and trying to take cover. But there are two small details here that stand out. The first is a small theater on the northeastern side of the mansion, and inside it we can watch as an X-rated movie plays on the TV. And judging by what's been left behind on some of the seats here, it's clear that multiple people were watching at the same time, which is just unsettling. Just outside of this theater though, we can find a kitchen with a dining table that's covered in paychecks for the security detail. And if we look at these a bit closer, we can see that one of them's written out for $15,000. Now, I don't know if every guard is making this much money, but seeing all of these checks sit here really puts into perspective just how wealthy and powerful Amos Vol really is. Regardless though, after finding this, we've essentially cleared the entire house. So now it's time to make our way back outside and into the party. Now, out here we'll see lounge areas that have been set up for guests, a rented stage with a DJ, and even a bar. But it's there that we'll find yet another unsettling sign that's been left by Vol. Quote, "Kids, if you're under 21, we can't serve you drinks legally." Legally. Love, Amos. Now this note implies that Vol doesn't care if the kids drink so long as they know that he's the one permitting them to do so. It's very strange. Further along though, we'll pass the pool, a table filled with presents, as well as the results of that selfie contest that we saw earlier. And apparently plenty of guests were totally on board with this idea because there are a lot of foot pictures proudly being displayed here. I don't know what to say, man. If my friend's dad held a contest where teenagers took pictures of their feet, I wouldn't be participating. I would be calling the fucking police. But for whatever reason here, no one seems the least bit disturbed. In fact, given the state of some of the rooms that we've been in, it's clear that most of the guests have been actively participating in everything going on here. And for lack of a better term, this teenage girl's birthday party has essentially turned into a Diddy party. But even after seeing all of this, we still don't fully grasp what's happening here. We know that Amos Vol is running a massive CP ring, but aside from a few tape cases upstairs, we haven't really found definitive proof. But that's about to change. Next to the pool, we can find a staircase leading down into what looks like an old maintenance area beneath the house. Now, at first, there's not really anything unusual here, just some storage boxes and water pumps. But then we start noticing some things that don't belong. A chalk-drawn hopscotch grid on the floor, a small toy tucked away in the corner, and then we open the next door and we find this. This is Amos Vol's darkroom, the place where he processes his photographs of underage children. This scene is absolutely sickening, but the worst part comes when we step into the next room and we find this. A shrine dedicated to Vol's own daughter. The messages scribbled on the walls make it clear that she is his next victim. And at this point, it's hard to even process what we're looking at here. We can find a rolled up mattress in the corner with one of Vol's shirts draped over it, suggesting that he's been living down here. Now, experiencing all of this at once is absolutely fucking crazy. And as I was trying to process all of this on my playthrough, I made the fatal mistake of walking back out towards the darkroom. And on my way out the door, I noticed a bookcase at the far side of the room. From a distance, it was filled with what had appeared to be white books. But once I got a bit closer, my stomach dropped. These aren't books, they're DVD cases, each labeled with a name and a number, which based on the cases shown upstairs, likely represents the ages of children. And there are thousands of them. This isn't just an operation, it's a massive archive. If there was ever any doubt about what's been happening here, it should be gone now. But even then, we're still not done here. In the next room, we can find a small film set, a camera and lighting setup, all focused on a crib. And at this point, we don't even want to think about what that means. So we move forward. And it's here, in this last room, that we find something that completely redefines the horror of this entire situation. The floor here has been dug up. Concrete rubble is scattered everywhere, and in the hole, we can see several barrels. And at first, it doesn't quite register. Why would a millionaire predator be digging up his own basement just to bury some barrels? But then we look around the room and we find toys and children's clothes. And then the final detail, the thing that makes everything click. We find flies hovering above the barrels. These are the remains of the children Vol photographs. Vol had been receiving children from George Brixley's talent agency. He would lure them in with his mansion, promising them stardom and convincing them that he was a legitimate producer. Then he would bring them down here to assault, film, and dispose of. The bodies of these children barreled and buried beneath his own house. These kids' parents never really know what happened to them. Their child just becomes another statistic, just another missing kid in Los Sueños. This reveal is without a doubt one of the most sickening moments that I've ever experienced in a game. Something fairly common that I get in my comments sections is stuff along the lines of, Ready or Not is scary and spooky, but it's got nothing on Spec Ops: The Line or No Russian from Modern Warfare 2. But as someone who's played through both of those moments, neither of them has made me physically recoil the way that Valley of the Dolls did. In my eyes, this is one of the most brilliantly executed gut punches that I've ever seen in a game. And what I think makes it so effective is that it never really overtly shocks you. It's just details. From a distance, this is just a regular darkroom until you look a bit closer. This is just a sculpture until you learn the character's history. And these are just barrels until you fully understand the context of what's going on here. Ready or Not doesn't show you horror, it lets you discover it. And each revelation hits like a freight train. But the most messed up part of it all, the entire game is like this. If you can somehow resist the urge of putting a hole the size of Montana in the back of Vol's head, you can go back to the evidence locker at the police station, and there you'll find a painting, a group of masked figures huddled around some children. And on the back of it, there's a note. As it turns out, this painting was a gift from other predators, thanking Vol for his contributions to their community. Just when you think you've won or done something here, the game reminds you that Vol was just one piece of a much larger and darker puzzle. There are more people just like him. More Brixleys, more networks, more children who were taken and never seen again. And that's what makes Ready or Not feel so uniquely disturbing to me. It doesn't just want you to feel disgusted, it wants you to feel helpless. Because in the end, there's no real victory to be had here. You got one of the bad guys, but there are thousands more of them out there. And for a game to leave you with that instead of just some false, cheery ending is really powerful to me. Later in this series, we'll be examining this potential network further, but for now, we've come to the end of the exploited storyline. I would really like to hear what your thoughts on this level were though. Do you think that there's a game more disturbing than this? If so, please be sure to let me know down in the comments below. Also, if you really enjoy this type of content, please consider subscribing to my channel or joining my Discord server. I'm really trying to build a community that talks about lore and all sorts of other cool stuff, so it would really mean a lot to me if you guys could go and join me on there. Right now, we only have a couple of active members, but I'm really trying to make that server a home for my channel, so it would mean the world to me if you took the time. I'll have a link down in the description below. Just go and join it, introduce yourself, post some shitty memes, do whatever you want to do. Finally though, I just want to give another big thank you to NordVPN for partnering with today's video. If you guys are interested in checking them out, I'll leave a link to them down on my pinned comment. But with all of that being said, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch today's video. You know I love you. I'm out.